Chapter 1, Displacement and Progress. I was born in Patnagar, Orissa in May 1957, 4 months before Sputnik, the first man made satellite to the orbit the Earth, was sent up, leading the great communication theorist Marshall McLuhan to foresee the collapse of time and space. He went on to coin the term global village, signifying the impact satellite technology would have in the decades ahead. Though not yet global in any sense, Patnagar remains somewhere between a village and a town with a population of 18,000 in 21st century India. Quite honestly, I have no real recollection of the place. On arrival, Memsahib Mashima had boiled some water, sterilized a new razor blade, taken some gauze, and separated me from my mother, thereby putting me into my own orbit. In the days to follow, Dandorma or Dando's mother, our domestic help, herself an untouchable, rubbed me vigorously twice a day with hot mustard oil to make sure I stayed there. From Patnagar, we moved to as many places as my father's junior level state government job took him. For the most part, I grew up in tribal districts like Koraput and Kionjhar. The earliest recollection I have is of three places in Koraput district where I lived between the ages of 3 and 8: Rayagarh, Nabarangpur, and Korapur. The former two have since become full fledged districts. The memory of each place is of a government house with no running water or electricity, but that did not mean hardships of any kind. It was a happy childhood marked by curiosity, contentment, and a sense of progressive unfolding that, looking back, seems almost magical. By the time I was beginning to become aware of the world around me, the three older children were gone from home. So, barring their occasional visits, my childhood was just four of us: my mother, father, Aurobindo, the fourth son, and I. The Raigad house had a high veranda. Its cement surface was huge and served as a drawing board. The monthly grocery included boxes of chalk that were not Russian. It was a childhood set in India of the late 1950s, when almost everything valuable, rice and wheat and sugar and kerosene, was rationed by the government and in turn by the mother in every middle class household. All day long, my brother and I drew pictures, often those of the idling steam engine across the railway tracks. Since there was no water at home, I used to be escorted to a municipal tap nearby where we bathed every day. I was a chubby baby, and I remember the attention I got from the women who would come to fetch water for their homes and stood chatting near the tap that smartly gushed out mountain water at designated time. On one occasion, a young lady tried to hold me in her arms, and that, for some reason, made me angry. I slipped out, took some mud in my tiny hands, and threw it at her, soiling her sari. In my mind's eye, I can still see her astonished face. Even today, that memory makes my heart break, and if only I could see her one more time, I would buy her flowers and make amends. The other image of Raigarh, clear in my mind, is the sight of tractors dragging trailers laden with sugarcane to the only sugar mill the district was proud to have, and urchins running after them to drag the cane stalks at the end of the trailer. On occasion, when not being watched, my brother and I joined the great sugarcane desperdos. After Raigad, we lived in Nabarangpur. literally the place of the nine rangas or color. It evokes memories of a dusty road to nowhere, upon which every evening a drunken old man would come tittering, abusing the government for its policy of prohibition. He would loudly proclaim that he would continue drinking and affirm, Mu pibi, ahuri mada pibi. Gandhi Buddha Kohichi Tu Pi Ahuri Mada Pi. I shall drink and I shall drink some more. Old man Gandhi has told me to drink and drink some more. The Paraja, the Kondha, and the Bhumia and the Dom, all indigenous people of the place who had known no government and lived in peace and harmony since the beginning of time, were suddenly being told that they could not make liquor out of the rice they had cultivated, nor could they drink it. As civilization collided with freedom, the old man created the earliest image of resistance in my 4-year-old mind. From Raigad to Nabarangpur to Koraput town, it was a fascinating journey. As a child, Koraput evoked a sense of timelessness for me. The picture of the outside world was one of a beautiful forests, group of peaceful Paraja tribal folk coming down from the mountains with forest produce to sell or to barter, firewood, some eggs, wild berries, tiny wild mushrooms that grew on the top of ant hills, bamboo shoots, and occasionally a rooster. They sold these at the Sunday Heart, an open air market, purchased rice, salt, kerosene, and liquor, and went back to where they had come from. The Paraja women folk were colorfully dressed, their skin glistening with the purity of the rainforest, their bodies tattooed to enhance their appeal and to protect them from evil. The children were almost always naked with happy faces and protruding bellies. They hung on to their mothers with shy curiosity. Occasionally, a well fed family dog came along with vigilant eyes and a mountain pride that canines of the forest possess. In the evenings, one saw them return to their homes in the forest, mostly inebriated, singing and dancing in groups, the men and the women teasing each other through the lilting music. The house we had in Korapur in the foothills was surrounded by big black rocks, wild mango trees, bamboo bushes, wild rose, and other vegetation which grew in abundance. We spent half our time atop the trees and after every rain built dams across tiny rivulets that formed as easily as they vanished. When at home, I often spent hours following ants to find out where they ultimately went, and their eternal business remains a fascination for me even today. In places like Korapur, there were no parks or designed play areas, no library, and certainly no movie theater. Some days, the sighting of a government jeep towards evening carrying a portable projector and a cinema screen used to bring electrifying excitement among the children of the neighborhood. They would run to their homes to inform others and return with sacks and old bed sheets and whatever else they could find to reserve their favorite spot on the ground. Even as the jeep folk set up the movie projector, it was all part of the efforts of the government's public relations department to let the people of Koraput know that there was a bigger world out there. The public relations people would first show new reels through which the government dished out mild propaganda, followed usually by a feature film with a patriotic, reformist, or moral overtone. Those who came in the late and could not get a seat up front chose to sit behind the screen, preferring to see the movie in reverse. But at close quarters, story had it that the first time the government brought this movie fair to the Paraja tribals up in the mountains, hoping to befriend them. The tribal folk ran for their lives the moment that the movie started, fearing that ghosts had been brought in by the government. As they ran, they pelted stones at their benefactor. This was my idyllic life until 1964, when I turned 7. That is when the marching orders came. My eldest brother, Devi Prasad, whom we used to call Dada Muni, after his master's in economics, had secured a teaching assignment at the university in Vani Vihar, literally the abode of the goddess of learning. Simultaneously, he was going to prepare for the civil service examination. My father's dream was that Dada Muni join the coveted Indian Administrative Service IAS, so mother was to go and look after him for a year or so, and as her appendage, I was to go as well. Aurobindo Da was going to stay back with my father and continue schooling in Koraput. He went to the government run district high school where he was in class 6. I did not attend school because there were no primary schools nearby. I was being homeschooled. I was excited about the proposed arrangement because more than anything else it meant a train ride to Bhubaneswar and going to the big city. After all, it was the capital of the state. Bhubaneswar even had two public buses that ferried people from one place to another within the town. That itself seemed so metropolitan. The day finally arrived. Mother and I sat on a bus and then on a train to finally reach Bhubaneswar. I was wonderstruck. The well laid out roads, houses that had electricity, the huge overhead water tank that served the entire university population, the imposing library building, countless little shops selling sweets and condiments, and colored aerated cold drinks in bottles. It was a fascinating new world. Imagine a little boy who had never seen colored, sweetened, aerated water that came in a bottle. The move to Bhubaneswar was good for me. A few days after moving there, I was taken to the primary school on the university campus where, after cursory interview, I was deemed fit to begin formal education and asked to report to the teacher in class 5. It was my first taste of schooling. Soon life settled into a nice routine for everyone. I went to school every day. Dada Muni went to the university and mother made sure that he got the nutrition that was required for an IS aspirant. After a year, when Dada Muni had made it into the IS and mother's job was over, it was time to move again. We moved to Balasore, a district bordering West Bengal, where my father had been transferred. I joined a new school. My father's job in Korapur had been that of the district employment officer. He was sent again as the district employment officer to Balasore. More than my new school, Balasore itself was exciting. It was very different from Korapur or Bhubaneswar. The coastal border district was green, dotted with ponds and big jamun and other tropical trees laden with fruit. We had been there for only a few months when transfer orders came again. This time, father had been posted to Kyonjar as a leaves reserve officer with the revenue department. A leave reserve officer provided cover for people going on long leave, and there was no predicting what kind of work would fall in his lap. I clearly remember the jeep ride In front, the driver with father in the middle and mother on the far side. We two brothers were in the back, each commanding a side seat that had unrestricted view of a road that seemed to come from the front, far from the distant horizon. Rushing back all the way, one could not tell if it was the road moving beneath us or the jeep moving on top of the tarmac. Kionjar, an erstwhile princely state, was home to ancient tribes like the Bathuri, Bhuiya, the Gond, the Ho, the Juang, the Kolha, the Munda, and the Santhal. One of the world's most ancient rocks, 38,000 million years old, lies over 100 square kilometers in Asan Park. There are frescoes dating back to the 5th century AD in the caves at Sitavinj. Locally, the place is known as Kendujhar. Kendu is the name of a wild fruit tree whose leaf is used for holding the tobacco in bidis. Jar means a stream that flows out of the earth. The place is probably named after a stream that presumably had its source under a kendu tree. The district headquarters was called Kionjhar Garh, the fort of Kionjhar. I saw no fort there. There had been a king somewhere in the shadows of the past. More real was a huge building that was the district high school, appropriately named Dhanurjaya Narayan High School, after the last noble to rule here. I spent 4 years at Dhanurjaya Narayan High School, but within that span, we shifted house 4 times. Between my father's retirement and our moving into Dadamuni's house when he came to Koenjar as a probationary IS officer. Mercifully, just as father retired from government service, Dadamuni was posted to Kionjar as sub-divisional officer. When I completed class 9, we moved again because Dadamuni was transferred to Chhatrapur, a coastal district headquarters in the southern part of the state. I went along, studied there for a year, and decided not to like the school. It was also in Chhatrapur that my childhood affliction with bronchitis became full blown asthma. Occasionally, I required hospitalization. On the one hand, I did not like my school, and on the other hand, my health was clearly getting affected by the high humidity. The family agreed that I could go back to my old school at Kionjar all by myself to complete my last year of high school. After a year there, I went to Bhubaneswar and joined BJB college, where I earned a degree in political science over the next 4 years before eventually beginning my work life. The fact that I changed 5 schools over 8 years has developed in me a certain bond with displacement. Actually, it ran in the family. My grandfather had moved from West Bengal to Bihar. My father, in turn, went to Orissa in search of work. When my turn came after my graduation, I eventually went to work in Delhi, then Calcutta, from there to Bangalore, to St. Joe's, California, back to Bangalore, then to New Jersey, and back again to Bangalore. By 2008, I had been married for 28 years, and my wife Shushmita and I had moved 14 houses. My life has not been merely about physical displacement. I have also constantly yearned to operate outside my comfort zone. I am not a management graduate. I did not study engineering, yet I have spent most of my life in the information technology IT industry, worked in the private sector, handled international assignments, and eventually co founded a business that went all the way from idea to IPO. It is not necessary that everyone has wanderlust in their soul like me, but it is important to know that quite often displacement is the key to progress and we need to develop comfort with it. My early life experiences helped me build a high degree of comfort with displacement. Water in a pool is stagnant only when it flows, it is energized. The entire universe is in constant motion. Even a moment of motionlessness is inconceivable in the cosmic state of things. Many professionals shudder at the thought of physical displacement, yet crave rapid mobility and growth in their careers. When you are continuously displaced, you make friends easily. You have low expectations from the unfamiliar, hence, you are more pleasantly surprised than frustrated. When faced with life's many ups and downs, you explore everything around you, develop curiosity, new lands, customs, food, and ways of doing things begin to draw you in. You learn to survive on the strength of who you are just for this day today. You build ingenuity in order to survive. You trust strangers and hence strangers trust you. You build intuitive capability to sniff trouble, which can tell you when to leave a bar. You become an interesting person because you have lots of stories to tell. Finally, you learn to move on.